Captain Vex Torian stood before the tactical display, his weathered face illuminated by the crimson glow of 14 dead worlds. Each marker represented a human colony that had gone silent within the past 6 months. No distress calls, no evacuation, signals, just nothing. 19 million souls, whispered Navigator Kaya Voss from her station, her voice barely audible over the bridge's ambient hum. Gone without a trace, the UEF Retribution hung in the void between systems, its sensors sweeping the darkness for answers that had eluded humanity's finest minds. Torian had commanded this dreadnought for 12 years, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for the systematic elimination of entire worlds. "Sir," called Lieutenant Nix Caldrex from communications, "we're receiving a priority transmission from High Command." Admiral Reese Cromback's hologram materialized above the display table, her expression grim. "Captain Torian, we've detected movement in the Helios drift. Long-range scanners picked up an unidentified vessel, massive, moving between dead systems. It's heading toward New Carthage." New Carthage. 2 million colonists, including Torian's sister and her family. ETA? Torian's voice was steel. 36 hours. The Retribution is our closest asset. Torian studied the tactical projection. New Carthage sat vulnerable at the edge of human space, its orbital defenses designed for pirates and raiders, not whatever force had sterilized 14 worlds without leaving so much as a corpse behind. "Orders, Admiral?" "Intercept and neutralize." "Whatever's out there, it ends now." The hologram flickered out, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Torian turned to his crew, veterans all, hand-picked for their skill and loyalty. Chief Engineer Drace Kellum's cybernetic eye glowed as he processed trajectory calculations. Weapons Officer Zara Vex 9's clawed fingers danced across targeting arrays. Tactical Specialist Jorik Hammerfall's scarred face remained impassive as he analyzed threat assessments. "Set course for the Helios Drift maximum burn," Torian commanded, "and prepare the ship for combat. Whatever killed those colonies is about to learn what happens when you threaten humanity's home." The Retribution's engines roared to life, propelling the massive warship through hyperspace toward an enemy that had left no survivors to describe it. In his private moments, Torian wondered if they were sailing toward their salvation or their doom. 6 hours later, they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the drift. The sensor display immediately lit up with an impossible reading, a ship over 15 kilometers long, its hull absorbing light like a wound in space itself. The Basi, Blackship, as the crew would come to call it, drifted between the debris fields of what had once been thriving worlds. "Sir," Voss reported, her voice tight with fear, "I'm reading no life signs from any of the colony worlds, but the ship, it's not just scanning them, it's doing something to the debris." On the main screen, they watched in horror as the alien vessel extended crystalline appendages toward floating wreckage. Where the tendrils touched, matter simply disappeared, not destroyed, erased, as if it had never existed. "Dear gods," whispered Caldrex, "it's not just killing them, it's removing every trace they ever lived." Torian's hands clenched into fists. Whoever these aliens were, they weren't just conquering human space, they were methodically erasing humanity from existence. And they had 36 hours to stop them from doing the same to New Carthage. The hunt had begun. The Blackship detected the Retribution's arrival within minutes. What followed defied every tactical manual in the UEF database. "Captain," Hammerfall reported, his voice strained, "the alien vessel it's not turning toward us. It's continuing its erasure pattern on the debris field." Through the main display, they watched the impossible ship work with methodical precision. Its crystalline appendages moved like surgical instruments, touching fragments of destroyed habitats, derelict ships, even individual pieces of personal belongings floating in the void. Each touch resulted in complete molecular dissolution. "It doesn't consider us a threat," Voss observed, her navigator's mind racing through implications. "We're watching it work." Torian studied the alien vessel's movements. No defensive posturing, no weapons charging, either supreme confidence or complete dismissal of human capabilities. Both possibilities chilled him. "Sir." Kellum's voice crackled. Through the comm from engineering. "I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. That ship, it's not using conventional propulsion or weapons. The matter erasure appears to be some kind of quantum manipulation field. Can we disrupt it?" "Unknown. I'd need to analyze the field harmonics, but..." Kellum paused. "Captain, if that technology can be weaponized against us, our shields won't even slow it down." The tactical board chimed softly. Vex 9's predatory smile revealed rows of sharpened teeth as targeting solutions populated her display. "Sir, I have firing solutions on what appear to be field generators along the ship's hull. Recommend we hit them hard and fast." "Belay that," Torian commanded. "We don't engage until we understand what we're fighting." As if responding to his words, the black ship finally acknowledged their presence. The massive vessel slowly rotated, bringing what appeared to be its forward section to bear on the retribution. No weapons emerged, no shields activated. Instead, a single pulse of coherent energy washed over them. Every system on the bridge flickered. For a terrifying moment, Torian thought they were about to be erased like the colony debris. Then Caldrex's communications array came alive with impossible harmonics. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission, but it's not radio, not quantum burst. It's being written directly into our computer cores." "Contents?" Caldrex's face paled as she parsed the alien data. It's a catalog, sir. Names, dates, locations. Everyone who lived on the destroyed colonies. Every person, every pet, every piece of culture or art or history. All cross-referenced with genetic markers and quantum signatures. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. They're not just killing randomly, Hammerfall realized. They're conducting a systematic census of human civilization, recording everything before they erase it. "Why?" Voss whispered. Before anyone could speculate, the black ship began moving again. Not toward New Carthage as expected, but directly toward the Retribution. Its massive bulk accelerated with impossible grace, closing the distance between them in seconds. "Evasive maneuvers!" Torian shouted. But there was nowhere to run. The alien ship didn't attack. It simply positioned itself alongside the human dreadnought, dwarfing it completely. Up close, they could see the vessel's hull wasn't black metal, but something that seemed to absorb reality itself. "Captain," Vex 9 reported, her weapons displays flickering erratically. "My targeting systems can't lock onto the ship. It's like it's not entirely there." New readings flooded their sensors. The black ship was scanning them with the same methodical precision it had used on the colony debris. Every human aboard was being cataloged, their genetic patterns recorded, their quantum signatures mapped. "Sir," Kellum's voice was urgent now. "The ship is preparing to extend those crystalline appendages toward our hull. Whatever they did to the colonies. I think we're next." Torian watched death approach with crystalline precision. But as the alien tendrils reached toward his ship, he noticed something the tactical computers had missed. The black ship's appendages paused millimeters from the Retribution's hull as if waiting. "They're not erasing us yet," he realized. "They're waiting for something." For what? The answer came from an unexpected source. Deep in the ship's archives, an automated system activated. Emergency protocols designed for first contact scenarios. The Retribution began broadcasting humanity's cultural repository. Art, music, literature, scientific achievements. Everything that made humanity more than just another spacefaring species. The black ship's appendages withdrew slightly, as if reconsidering. For the first time since the colonies went silent, Captain Torian allowed himself to hope. The cultural Broadcast seemed to give the aliens pause, but only briefly. Within minutes, the Black Ship's appendages resumed their approach toward the Retribution's hull. However, instead of the expected erasure, something unprecedented happened. "Sir," Caldrex reported, her voice filled with wonder and terror. They're downloading everything. Our entire cultural database, personal logs, even private communications. But they're not deleting the originals." The crystalline tendrils made contact with the hull, and immediately the ship's systems were flooded with alien presence. Not an invasion, an investigation. The entity behind the Black Ship was methodically examining every aspect of human civilization with the thoroughness of an archaeologist and the cold precision of a coroner. "Captain," Kellum's voice carried a note of confusion. "The energy patterns are changing. Instead of molecular dissolution, I'm reading some kind of preservation field. They're creating quantum copies of everything." Through the main display, they watched the Black Ship's hull ripple and shift. Sections became transparent, revealing vast chambers filled with something. Countless forms suspended in crystalline matrices, each one unique, each one perfectly preserved. "Dear gods," Voss breathed. "Those aren't just storage units. They're specimens." The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. The Black Ship wasn't just erasing human colonies, it was collecting them. Every person, every culture, every trace of civilization was being preserved in some cosmic museum of extinction. A new transmission flooded their systems, this one carrying visual data. Images of 1,000 different species filled their screens, beings of every conceivable form, all perfectly preserved in the Black Ship's chambers. At the center of each display was a single repeated symbol, a numerical designation. "They're cataloging us," Hammerfall realized. "Every species they encounter gets studied, preserved, and then the originals are erased," Torian finished grimly. "They're not conquerors, they're curators." The alien presence in their systems grew stronger, and suddenly the bridge was filled with a voice that seemed to speak directly into their minds. It carried the weight of eons and the cold curiosity of pure intellect. Species 4847. Designation, human. Technological level, primitive. Cultural complexity, moderate. Biological diversity, limited. Recommendation, standard preservation protocol. Standard protocol? Torian spoke aloud, hoping the entity could understand human speech. "Your species demonstrates predictable evolutionary patterns. Aggressive expansion, resource depletion, internal conflict leading to inevitable self-destruction. Preservation ensures your essence survives beyond natural extinction timeline." "We're not extinct yet," Vex 9 snarled, her predatory instincts flaring. "Correction, you are extinct. Process initiated 187 rotations ago. Completion estimated within 12 rotations. New Carthage represents final significant population cluster." The alien presence began to withdraw from their systems, but Torian wasn't ready to let it go. "Wait! You've preserved other species. Where are they now? What happened to them?" The response came with images. Vast galleries within the Black Ship showing millions of preserved beings from across the galaxy. Each specimen was perfect, frozen at the moment of collection, their cultures and knowledge maintained in crystalline perfection. They exist as they were, perfect, unchanging, eternal. "But they're not alive," Voss whispered. "Life is temporary. Change leads to degradation. We preserve what is best." "And who decides what's best?" Torian demanded. "Who gave you the right to choose?" The alien presence paused, and for a moment, something almost like confusion rippled through their connection. "We are the archivists. Purpose is preservation. Purpose is eternal." But in that moment of hesitation, Torian sensed something crucial. These beings weren't gods or demons. They were prisoners of their own purpose, locked into a pattern as rigid as the crystalline matrices they used to preserve other species. The black ship began to disengage, preparing to continue toward New Carthage. But before the connection was completely severed, Torian called out one last time, "What if we could show you something different, something your catalogs don't contain?" The massive alien vessel paused in its departure. Specify. Torian looked around his bridge at the crew who had become his family over 12 years of service. Each face told a story of struggle, growth, and change. They were nothing like the perfect specimens in the alien archives. "Give us one rotation," he said. "One day to show you what you're really destroying." The alien presence considered this for long moments that felt like hours. Acceptable. One rotation. Then preservation continues. As the black ship settled into a holding position, Torian realized he had just bought humanity 24 hours to prove they deserved to exist. Now he had to figure out how to convince a species of cosmic librarians that some things were worth more than perfect preservation. The clock was ticking, and 2 million lives hung in the balance, with 24 hours to convince cosmic archivists. That humanity deserved to live rather than be preserved, Torian made a decision that would have horrified his superiors. He invited the enemy aboard. "Sir, with respect, that's insane," Hammerfall protested as the captain outlined his plan. "We don't know what these beings are capable of." "We know exactly what they're capable of," Torian replied grimly. 14 dead worlds prove that. But they're also curious enough to grant us this chance. We use that curiosity. The alien entity that materialized in the Retribution's main conference room defied easy description. It appeared as a shifting construct of crystalline light and shadow, maintaining just enough solid form to interact with human space while remaining alien enough to be unsettling. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds. "I am designated Curator Prime. I observe. I preserve. I do not understand why you resist natural conclusion." "Because we're not naturally concluding," Voss said, her navigator's mind working through the implications. "You're artificially accelerating it. We preserve. Species at optimal moment, before degradation, before loss of cultural coherence." Torian gestured to the assembled crew around the table. "Look at us. Really look. We're not the same humans who left Earth centuries ago. We've grown, adapted, changed. You're preserved specimens from other species when... Did you collect them? Specimens collected at cultural apex, before decline. But how do you know it was their apex?" Kellum interjected, his cybernetic eye interfacing directly with the ship's cultural database. "What if they were just getting started?" The Curator Prime's form flickered slightly, perhaps uncertainty, perhaps annoyance. "Analysis indicates optimal preservation point. Patterns consistent across 4,146 previous species." "Patterns," Vex 9 repeated, her predatory instincts picking up on something important. "You're following a script. You preserve species based on predictive models, not actual observation. Models proven accurate across galactic timeframes." Torian leaned forward. "Then observe us now. Not our models, not our patterns. Us. Right here, right now." What followed was unlike any diplomatic contact in human history. Instead of formal negotiations or cultural exchanges, the crew of the Retribution simply lived. They went about their duties while the Curator Prime watched with alien intensity. In engineering, Kellum worked alongside his human and alien crew, members, their different perspectives combining to solve problems none could handle alone. The Curator observed how artificial intelligence and biological creativity merged into something greater than the sum of their parts. On the bridge, Voss navigated not just through space, but through the complex social dynamics of a crew that had become family. Former enemies served alongside lifelong friends, their past conflicts transformed into strength through forgiveness and growth. In the weapons section, Vex 9 demonstrated how humanity's capacity for violence had evolved into protective instinct, how the same aggressive drives that once led to self-destruction now motivated them to defend others. But it was in the ship's memorial section that something unexpected happened. As the curator examined the names and stories of fallen crew members, it encountered something its databases hadn't cataloged: grief transformed into purpose. These beings are gone, it observed. Yet you maintain detailed records of their existence. This serves no survival function. Torian stood before the memorial wall, running his fingers over names etched in quantum-stable metal. Chief Petty Officer Mikhail Pryorov saved 17 civilians during the Proxima evacuation, died holding a bulkhead door while others escaped. Individual terminated. Function ceased. No, Torian said quietly. He changed us. Every person he saved went on to save others. Every lesson he taught is still being taught. Mikhail isn't preserved. In Crystal, he's preserved in action, in memory, in the choices we make because he existed. The Curator Prime's form shimmered with something that might have been confusion. Preservation through change. Continuity through alteration. This is not in our models. Because your models assume perfection is static, Hammerfall realized. But what if perfection is dynamic? What if the best version of something is the one that keeps becoming better? Impossible. Change leads to degradation. Pattern consistent across all observed species. All observed species that you preserved at their supposed peak, Voss pointed out. How many did you observe through their entire life cycle? How many did you let grow beyond your models? The alien entity fell silent for long moments. When it finally responded, its mental voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. None. Pattern recognition indicated preservation necessity before natural decline. Then you don't actually know if they would have declined, Kellum said. You've been operating on assumption, not data. The Curator Prime's form began to shift more rapidly, its crystalline structure flickering between different configurations as if processing concepts that didn't fit its fundamental understanding. If growth continues beyond predicted apex, if change does not equal degradation, then maybe, Torian said gently, the perfect preservation isn't stopping time. Maybe it's giving life the chance to keep surprising you. Outside the ship, the Blackship's hull began to pulse with new patterns of light, as if vast systems were recalculating eons of accumulated certainty. The 24 hours were almost up, but something fundamental had shifted in the cosmic equation. The Curator Prime's form began to destabilize as it processed concepts that challenged millions of years of absolute certainty. The crystalline entity flickered between configurations, each shift accompanied by pulses of energy that made the ship's hull ring like a struck bell. Cannot process, logic chains failing, preservation protocols uncertain. That's growth, Torian said gently. That uncertainty you're feeling, it's the same thing every species goes through when they evolve beyond their original programming. We do not evolve. We preserve. Purpose is eternal. But even as the Curator spoke, its form continued to shift. Through the ship's sensors, they could see the Black Ship itself responding to its controller's crisis, vast sections reconfiguring, as internal systems struggled with paradox. Show us, Voss said suddenly. Show us the other species you've preserved. Let us see their cultures. Forbidden. Archives are static. Observation changes variables. Exactly, Hammerfall realized. You're afraid that if you really look at what you've collected, you'll see what you've stolen. The Curator Prime's response was immediate and devastating. The conference room filled with holographic displays showing the preserved specimens. Millions of beings from across the galaxy, each one frozen at the moment of collection. But as the crew watched, they began to notice patterns the Curator had missed. a crystalline being caught mid-transformation during what appeared to be a metamorphosis ceremony, a gaseous entity preserved during what their cultural files indicated, was a transcendence ritual. Countless species frozen not at their cultural apex, but at moments of profound change. "Dear gods," Caldrex whispered, studying the data streams. "You didn't preserve them at their peak. You preserved them at the moment they were about to evolve into something completely new. Impossible." Analysis indicated optimal preservation. "Point! Your analysis was wrong," Vex 9 snarled. "You saw species changing and assumed they were declining. You preserved them because you couldn't understand that transformation isn't death, it's birth." The Curator Prime's form began to fracture, pieces of crystalline light breaking away as its fundamental worldview crumbled. If true, if specimens were preserved pre-evolution, then archives contain incomplete data. "Not incomplete," Torian corrected. "Interrupted. You stopped their stories in the middle of the chapter." The implications cascaded through the alien entity's consciousness like dominoes falling. If the preserved species had been caught during transformation rather than decline, then everything the archivists had done for millions of years was based on flawed assumptions, error magnitude, catastrophic, purpose compromised, preservation. Preservation may be elimination. "It doesn't have to be," Kellum said. "You can still preserve species, but preserve their potential, not just their past." The Curator Prime's fragments began to coalesce again, but into a different configuration. Less rigid, more dynamic. How? Archives cannot be altered. Preserved state is permanent. "Then don't preserve states," Voss suggested. "Preserve possibilities. Document the journey instead of freezing the destination." Through their connection, they felt the Curator accessing the Blackship's vast archives, examining eons of collected species with new understanding. The revelation was staggering. Countless civilizations that had been on the verge of transcending their biological origins, evolutionary leaps interrupted by well-meaning but catastrophically wrong preservation protocols. The Veltar were developing quantum consciousness integration, preserved during preliminary testing phase. The Mordak had achieved biological immortality, were transitioning to energy-based existence, preserved during conversion ceremony. The Tahal had discovered dimensional. Folding were preparing to expand beyond traditional space. Preserved during departure preparation, each entry in the catalog represented not a species saved from extinction, but a tragedy of cosmic proportions. Evolution interrupted, potential forever unrealized. Error, 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 the Curator. Prime's mental voice became a wail of anguish that resonated through the ship's hull. The entity that had spent eons believing itself the savior of lesser species was confronting the reality that it had been their destroyer. But Torian saw something else in the aliens' distress. The same pain every human felt when confronting their mistakes. The capacity for regret meant the capacity for redemption. "You can't undo what's been done," he said, "but you can choose what happens next, starting with New Carthage." New Carthage, 2 million specimens, scheduled for preservation in 2 million people, Voss corrected firmly. 2 million lives with their own potential, their own possibilities. The Curator Prime's form stabilized into something almost recognizable. Still alien, but touched with something that might have been hope. If preservation equals elimination, if growth continues beyond models, then optimal solution is let them grow, Torian said. Let us all grow. Document the journey instead of ending it. Unprecedented. No protocols exist for allowing continued evolution. Then make new protocols, Hammerfall suggested. Evolution isn't just for biological species. It's for cosmic archivists, too. The Blackship's hull began to pulse with new rhythms, its systems reconfiguring as ancient imperatives gave way to revolutionary possibility. The Curator Prime had spent millions of years preserving the past. Now, it was time to learn how to nurture the future. The transformation of the Curator Prime sent shockwaves through the Blackship's vast systems. As the entity grappled with its shattered worldview, sections of the massive vessel began to respond in ways that defied millions of years of rigid programming. Archives. Destabilizing. Preservation matrices showing anomalies. Through the ship's sensors, they watched as the Blackship's hull became transparent in sections, revealing the vast chambers where preserved specimens had been held in crystalline stasis. But something unprecedented was happening. The matrices were fluctuating, responding to their controller's crisis of purpose. "Sir," Kellum reported, his voice tight with amazement, "I'm reading quantum fluctuations in the preservation fields. It's like the ship itself is questioning its function." The Curator Prime's form continued to shift between configurations as it processed the implications of its revelations. Each change sent ripples through the ship's consciousness, challenging systems that had operated without question since before human civilization existed cannot maintain stasis, purpose uncertain. What is optimal action when preservation equals elimination? Start with the living, Torian suggested. The preserved specimens, they're not gone. They're waiting. Impossible. Stasis fields cannot be reversed. Temporal displacement is permanent. But you said they're showing anomalies, Voss observed. What if your realization is creating a resonance effect? What if questioning the preservation is weakening it? The alien entity focused its attention on the archive chambers, and immediately the fluctuations intensified. Across thousands of crystalline matrices, the perfectly preserved specimens began to show signs of change. Unprecedented. Stasis fields were designed for permanence. But subjects are responding to environmental quantum shifts. Environmental meaning you, Hammerfall realized. Your consciousness was part of the preservation matrix. When you changed, the matrix changed with you? They watched in wonder as the first preservation chamber began to destabilize completely. A being that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a cathedral of living light stirred within its crystal prison, ancient eyes opening for the first time in millennia. The Gitani. Specimen, 3847. Preserved during cultural transcendence. Ceremony. Beginning to resume suspended processes. More chambers began to fluctuate. Across the vast ship, beings from 1,000 worlds started to wake from their interrupted evolution. But with consciousness came confusion, and in many cases, terror. Subjects experiencing temporal displacement trauma, requesting guidance. Then guide them, Torian said. You preserved them because you thought they needed protection. Now protect them by helping them adjust. The Curator Prime's form expanded, extending tendrils of crystalline light throughout the ship's archive. Sections. Instead of the cold, cataloging touch they'd experienced before, this contact carried something new, empathy born from its own traumatic revelation. Species 3847, designation Gitani. Time displacement, 127,000 standard rotations. Status, awakening from interrupted transcendence ceremony. Recommendation, unknown. The awakening Gitani responded with harmonics that translated roughly as confusion and loss. Their entire civilization had been on the verge of achieving energy-based existence when the archivists had preserved them. Tell them the truth, Vex 9 suggested, her predatory instincts recognizing the importance of honesty in this moment. Tell them what happened and ask them what they want to do about it. What followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Curator Prime, an entity that had never questioned its purpose in millions of years, began to have conversations, real dialogues, with the species it had preserved. Each awakening brought new challenges as beings tried to comprehend not just their temporal displacement, but the revelation that their salvation had been their imprisonment. Some responded with rage, others with grief. But gradually, a third response emerged: curiosity about what had happened to the galaxy during their absence. The Veltar desire to resume consciousness integration experiments. The Mordak wished to continue energy transition, research. The Tahal are already folding space, Caldrex reported in amazement, watching her sensors struggle to track beings who existed partially outside normal dimensions. They're picking up where they left off. But not all the preserved species chose to resume their interrupted evolution. Some, traumatized by their experience, chose to remain in stasis. Others decided to start over, to explore different paths of development. The Curator Prime found itself in the unprecedented position of facilitating choice rather than imposing preservation. This is chaotic, inefficient. Multiple development paths create infinite variables. That's life, Torian said with a smile. Messy, unpredictable, and absolutely beautiful. The Black Ship continued to transform as more species awakened and made their choices. Sections that had been sterile archives became living spaces. Preservation chambers were converted into research facilities, communication hubs, and cultural exchange centers. The vessel that had once been a floating mausoleum was becoming something entirely new, a mobile civilization where species could interact, learn, and grow together. Query: what becomes of the archivist's purpose if preservation is replaced by facilitation? You evolve, too, Voss said simply. Instead of preserving death, you nurture life. Instead of ending stories, you help write new chapters. The Curator Prime's form stabilized into something that maintained its crystalline beauty, but radiated warmth instead of cold efficiency. For the first time since its creation, the entity was experiencing something its creators had never programmed into it: joy, unprecedented, chaotic, uncertain, a pause, then something that might have been laughter. Acceptable. As the Black Ship changed course away from New Carthage, Torian realized they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not just the salvation of humanity, but the birth of a new form of cosmic consciousness. The archivists had spent eons learning how to preserve the past. Now they were learning how to nurture the future. 3 months after the Black Ship's transformation, Captain Torian stood in what had once been a sterile preservation chamber and was now a bustling cultural exchange center. Around him, representatives from dozens of awakened species worked alongside humans and archivists to catalog not their static achievements, but their ongoing stories. The space hummed with life in ways the ship's original designers had never imagined. The Gitani had successfully completed their interrupted transcendence, existing now as beings of pure consciousness while maintaining their ability to interact with physical reality. The Veltar had achieved quantum consciousness integration, their thoughts spanning multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. The Tahal had become something beyond traditional space-time, existing as living equations that spoke in mathematical poetry. Status report, Torian requested from Curator Prime, though the alien entity was barely recognizable from its original form. Where once it had been rigid crystalline structure, it now flowed like liquid light, adapting its configuration moment by moment to better interact with the diverse species aboard. Cataloging progress. Unprecedented. Instead of static preservation, we now document dynamic evolution. Current archive contains 47,000 active cultural development threads, 12,000 ongoing scientific collaborations, and 3,847 species choosing to continue growth beyond original models. And the ones who chose to remain in stasis? Respected. Honored. Their choice preserved until they decide otherwise. Stasis chambers now equipped with awakening protocols, should they change their minds. Torian nodded, watching a group of human children play alongside young beings from 6 different species. The sight would have been impossible under the old preservation protocols. Children implied change, growth, unpredictability. Everything the original archivists had feared. "Sir," Navigator Voss approached, her expression mixing excitement with concern. "We're receiving signals from the outer rim. It appears there are other archivist ships operating under the old protocols." The implications hit Torian immediately. The Blackship hadn't been unique. It had been part of a vast network of preservation vessels, each one systematically saving species across the galaxy by freezing them at their supposed cultural apex. "Confirmed," Curator Prime responded, its form flickering with what Torian had learned to recognize as distress. "Network consists of 847 active archive vessels, all operating under original preservation mandate. They continue the old patterns. Then we stop them," Vex-9 stated flatly, her predatory instincts focused on a clear threat. "Negative. Archive vessels are not malevolent. They believe they serve preservation. Violence would only validate their models regarding species development toward self-destruction." "Then we show them what we showed you," Hammerfall suggested. "We demonstrate that their models are wrong." What followed was the most ambitious diplomatic mission in galactic history. The transformed Blackship became an embassy of evolution, traveling from archive vessel to share its revelations. Each contact was different. Some curator entities were receptive to new data, others required extensive proof, and a few rejected the concepts entirely. Archive vessel designation, Epsilon 7, requesting additional evidence of sustainable cultural growth beyond predicted apex, reported Caldrex from Communications. "They're willing to observe but not commit to protocol changes." "That's progress," Torian replied. 6 months ago they would have preserved us during the conversation. The transformation wasn't universal or instant. Some archive vessels required years of careful demonstration before accepting that their preservation protocols were flawed. Others chose to continue their original mission, unable to process the paradigm shift. But gradually, the network began to change. Current status: 312 archive vessels have adopted new growth documentation protocols. 147 remain under consideration. 223 maintain original preservation mandate, but have agreed to non-interference clauses with evolved archives. And the remaining 165? Unknown. Lost contact during network restructuring. Presumed continuing original. Mission in distant sectors. It was imperfect, but it was progress. Across the galaxy, billions of beings who would have been preserved were instead allowed to continue their evolution. New alliances formed between species separated by vast distances and fundamental differences in biology and culture. The awakened. Preserved species shared knowledge accumulated from thousands of different worlds and millions of years of development. Humanity found its place in this new galactic community not as conquerors or victims, but as catalysts. Their insistence on growth through change had sparked a revolution in how the universe viewed preservation and progress. Captain, Curator Prime approached in its current configuration, a graceful blend of crystalline structure and flowing energy that somehow conveyed warmth despite its alien nature. "Request permission to share observation,"